Hello, everyone. Rob Guest from football.london here, and welcome to the latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me as ever, it's Alasdair Gold. Ali, you well?
Yeah, I am. Thanks. Hope you are too. We're in that awkward kind of pause now, aren't we, between seasons and football matches? I think kind of the Champions League final really marks the end, doesn't it, of all fixtures for the previous season and just international stuff to go, which doesn't have quite the same vibe. Although, of course, the tournaments are very cool with the Euros and the Copa America, of course. But yeah, already looking forward now to. I say already looking forward to next season, but we're about to wrap up this season, so kind of not quite looking forward yet.
Yeah, bit of a different episode of the podcast today. It's going to be a season review of the 23-24 Premier League campaign. So we'll be looking back on how Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham got on, and also deciding our player of the year, goal of the season, etc. So first of all, Ali, do you want to just sum up your thoughts on the season as a whole?
An interesting experience is probably the best way to put it. I think we've seen. Look, first off the bat, way better than last year. So much better than last year, and also I think just as journalists, far more enjoyable to cover. Yeah, there was such a even it started kind of positively last year, but then it just became so toxic kind of in and around the club, outside the club. It was just a horrible atmosphere to kind of just report on as well. And every week it felt like a real kind of it was tough, wasn't it? I'm not saying, we've got the toughest jobs in the world or anything, but it did feel like we were writing the same thing every week about the same sort of problems and issues within the club. And then this season has brought, I feel, on the whole, a lot of positivity, which is much more enjoyable to write and talk about. The club feels like it's got a direction. Has it been perfect? Absolutely not. Has it very much been a season that is a rebuild season? Yes, you can see that in a lot of the stuff. There's so many moments. I mean, we're going to have our like moments of the season, game of the season, things like that. We're going to talk about, and there's so many games that we could speak about where within them you saw what Spurs are going to be, but you also saw what Spurs used to be, and how somehow that doesn't quite marry up all the times and all the time. So, I mean, look, a season of progress. I think it has to be. You can see that in the numbers. They finished 3 places higher in the table, finished fifth, scored more goals, fewer goals conceded. A much more interesting to watch style of football, even though you can see that's in its early stages. It's very embryonic. Signings have been good, probably the highest hit rate in terms of signings for a fair few seasons. Yeah, I think as a whole, a decent season, but also not without its disappointments. I think the cup exits were really disappointing. Yes, you could say that one was on a penalty shootout and one was against Man City, the kind of all-conquering champions. However, that's just another season without any kind of real threat on silverware. So that was really disappointing. I feel like the middle stage of the season was disappointing, but with a reason for it, with all the injuries and issues like that. Whereas I think the disappointing period towards the end of the season has less excuses. I think that was just genuinely really disappointing. But on the whole, I think there's more positives than negatives to take out of this. And I think the players seem to be in a really good place about what next season's going to hold. They all seem very, very positive about it. Postecoglou seems very clear on what he wants to do, and that's a good thing. So, yeah, I think as a season, there's lots of players that we can kind of talk about individually that have had good seasons. There's a few players that will want to do a lot better next season, but ultimately, the same as the team, there's a decent platform to actually build on now, which isn't something maybe we have been able to say about Spurs in recent years.
Yeah, I think it's been a good season on the whole, because I can remember when Harry Kane left on the eve of the new campaign, and everyone was predicting, Spurs are going to be, bottom half of the table potentially without the top scorer. Ange Postecoglou, no experience of the Premier League, coming in, and he proved the doubters wrong from the get-go. 3 successive Premier League Manager of the Month awards, Tottenham at the top of the Premier League table. You're just thinking, what if those injuries didn't happen against Chelsea? What if Son was onside? Then the 2-0 up, and they probably would have won that game by about 4 or 5 in the end, because, there were absolute rampant in the first 15 to 20 minutes against Chelsea. Looks really, really impressive. But yeah, I think it's good. Just a shame they didn't, make it into the top four in the end, because when you're looking back on a number of the results in the middle of the season and then towards the end of the campaign, they could have, snuck in there. There's only 2 points between them and Villa, but then you could also say Europa League might be the better competition for Spurs next season. Might not be ready for the Champions League just yet, but I think they're in a really good position for the future under Ange Postecoglou. He's built a really good side, which will get better. You'd hope this summer with some, more important signings, and I think all the players will benefit from a year under Ange. And I think they can go places next year. I agree with you in terms of some of the disappointments, like the cup exits, and there was some really, really bad performances in there as well. But for a team that finished 8th the previous season to be in the top 5, I think all season, did he drop out of it at any point, really?
If they did, it was very briefly.
Yeah, to be top 5 all season in the Champions League mix for 90% of the campaign. Yeah, I think it's been a strong campaign, number of highs and lows, but I think a lot for Tottenham fans to look forward to.
I was going to ask you whether, had the season flipped around and Spurs had the start to the season at the end, had that amazing unbeaten run of 10 games or whatever it was, whether that would have changed the kind of outlook on the season. But then I just realised, had they had the end to the season they had at the start, Postecoglou probably wouldn't have made it past that time, because we know what Spurs are like. They would have panicked and they probably would have got shot of him like they did with Nuno. So maybe he needed that kind of start, which was probably better than all expectations, to actually give him the time to kind of overcome the problems that he said himself were going to come. It just came a bit later than we actually expected them to.
Yeah. I think loads have mentioned that if Spurs, had finished the season so strongly, then there would be such a positive mood. And I think probably everyone expected it to pan out like that, in terms of a rocky start and then, the start to hit the stride under Postecoglou as the season goes on and finish strongly. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, they finished 5th, 2 points off the Champions League places, produced a number of good performances, some good results. I think, Tottenham, it can be a really successful season for them next campaign.
Yeah, like I say, I think the foundations have been put in there. I think, especially behind the scenes, when I talk to people behind the scenes, it's just such a more positive outlook. Like, people involved around the first team setup, people are involved around the academy. There's just this really joined up thinking now, and everyone seems to all have one singular direction to go in. I think we've seen it even with the way the under-21s and the under-18s have played, that there's a bit more of, and I hate to use these buzzwords, but synergy. There's more of they all seem to play in the same way. And I think when you've got someone like Wayne Burnett in the under-21s, he loves to play kind of attacking, exciting football. And that would have been probably very much in contrasting with the way Conte wanted to set up, and maybe Mourinho and Nuno in the past. Whereas now, maybe the academy is more of a reflection of the first team. But perhaps as time goes on, we'll see that makes the pathway a little bit easier for players to come through as well. And how many times we'd have done this podcast last season and I would have been crying out for the lack of identity at the club and stuff. And it kind of feels like there is one. It's very early days. Like I say, it's very embryonic, and this is Tottenham. It could still go easily either way, but you kind of feel like there's a strong leader there at the top now that certainly feels like he's got the belief of the club around him. And hopefully this summer will reflect that. And yeah, it will lead them into next season nicely. Have a strong pre-season, and we'll have the fixtures soon for the start of next season. We'll get to see how that's going to play out for them, and who there's always a massive game really early on, like third game or fourth game, isn't there? Which is always one of the early big tests. And yeah, I'm genuinely really looking forward to next season, which hasn't always been the case. As a football fan, sometimes you kind of have a memory reset, don't you? It's almost like, yeah, I know it was awful last season, but the hope is back. Next season's going to be great. Whereas I kind of feel like this time you don't even need that reset. You can see where the plan is and what it's meant to be and what's meant to happen next. And if they can take those steps as they're planning to, yeah, it should be good for us all.
I think fixtures are out Tuesday, June the 18th, so 2 weeks tomorrow. So don't have to wait long at all for them, really. And then, everyone, the build up to the new season starts pretty much from right there. So, right, going back to the 23-24 campaign, we'll start off with our games of the season. Ali, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm going to go for the 5-1 against Lion City Sailors. No, I'm not really. I'm not going for that one. That was not my game of the season. I could have done the postponed match in Bangkok as well. I still have visions of like the crowd cheering these guys that were desperately trying to get like the monsoon water off of the pitch. It became a sport within itself. God, that feels like so long ago now. That's incredible. That's July. That's
Were
just mad.
they losing at half time in that one?
They
Did they go
what, the Lion
one
City one?
down?
Lion City, they
Yeah,
conceded early, didn't they? I remember,
yeah.
and it was all like, "Oh, crikey." Yeah, that was. I mean, yeah. If I was going to pick a friendly game, I suppose you could have probably picked the Shakhtar or Barcelona games as the more of a sense of that was 9 goals. I do think I know we kind of the idea is always that preseason results don't matter, but I do think scoring 9 goals in the week before you start the season kind of showed the players that the attacking football. Okay, that's quite cool. We can see what it's doing. But yes, I'm not picking preseason friendlies as my matches this season. I'm actually there's a few that I could pick. There's so many kind of late goal moments in games that were very exciting as well. And I liked, weirdly, which I never normally like, I liked the game at the Etihad because of the injuries Spurs had and the way they went about it and still kept themselves afloat in the game, despite the fact they had Emerson, Ben Davies as their centre backs. That should be a recipe for like a 10-0 defeat, really, on paper. And they did so well that day and took the game to them. But I'm going to go for the 2 Villa matches. And that includes a defeat as well. Because I just kind of feel like that 2-1 defeat at home in November, I felt that had so much of the Postecoglou team we want to see in it, that game. And I know it's weird that I'm talking about a defeat, but Spurs battered Villa. I think it was up there, wasn't it, with records for, I think, shots on target and saves made and all this sort of stuff. Wasn't it? Weirdly, I was at my father-in-law's yesterday, and Sky were doing their showing the good games from last season or whatever they do. I don't know what it's called. And it was the Villa home game, really weirdly. And I forgot about Lo Celso's deflected volley. It was like a really nice way. That was when he was in that little kind of run, wasn't it? When he scored against them and he scored against City in the next game. And I just watched back and I was like, and that was an injury hit Spurs as well. That was about 2 weeks after. It was after the international break, so you'd had the Chelsea game, and then there was a little kind of break before that. And I was just watching it, and I was loving it. And I don't normally would ever watch a defeat and think, what a brilliant performance. But the way Spurs played, the way they carved Villa apart, so much of the football is the football that I think I'm hoping to see next season. It was so great to watch, and it was just missing the cutting edge, the finishing touch at the end, which is what obviously they've got to add this summer. And I think even Emery and Ollie Watkins said after the game, we should have been done at half time. They absolutely killed us in that first half. We should have been buried in the scoreline, but Villa just managed to get a couple of goals against the run of play, and they win the game. And I think you've got the nice kind of parallel then, I guess, to the away game when it was such a shame, really, the way the season ended, because that felt like such a huge moment in the season. It felt like a moment when Spurs had to step up. There was a lot of pressure. They were going into that game where, they'd started to turn results around. Obviously, they'd had the iffy defeat at home against Wolves, but then they'd beaten Palace. And they were going into this game and everyone was kind of predicting that Villa were in a good bit of form there, that they were going to come out on top. And for Spurs to go there, put in a really, really professional, calm, composed, mature display and score 4 goals as well, it was kind of almost like, here's the goals we should have scored in the home fixture. And I just feel like those 2 games really nicely encapsulated a lot of what Spurs can do under Postecoglou, and that's in terms of the football, but also I think the mentality, especially in the away game, of kind of taking the pressure. And that was what I think Spurs did fairly well. If anything, they tripped up in the games mostly where they shouldn't have tripped up, like Fulham away. I know that's a difficult fixture, but they should never have put in the performance they did at Fulham away. And Newcastle away, not learning their lessons from the previous season, things like that. But I kind of felt like those two games and some of the bigger games when they were away from home kind of encapsulated the way that they should play. So yeah, I'm going to pick those out as my kind of two games in the season: a win and a defeat. And there are others. As Newcastle at home was a very good performance, but for me, yeah, that was a nice little kind of encapsulation, I think, of Postecoglou, what's to come and what still needs to be fixed, but also some of the exciting elements of that team.
That was typical Spurs as well, to win 4-0 at Villa and then follow it up with a shocking 3-0 defeat the following week at Fulham.
Absolutely.
Showed two sides to them. For my games of the season, I think as a neutral, I think Spurs' 4-1 defeat against Chelsea is the game of the season. So that was just like complete madness, that 90 minutes.
So difficult to report on, wasn't it?
Yeah, Spurs started so well, and if Son was onside, then it'd have been a comfortable win. Then Romero's red card happened, Van der Ven and Maddison going off injured. And even then, even at 1-1, you still felt Spurs, you were confident that Spurs would still get something out of the game, even though they were pressing so high and leaving so many gaps at the back. Because Chelsea did have a number of chances, didn't they? And just couldn't score up until, I think it was Jackson, who got the hat-trick in the end from close range. But there was even that moment when Eric Dyer's volley went in, I think, to make it 2-2. Incredible game. But I think from a Tottenham perspective, I think the Man City one away, there've been really good games at City in the past, 2 or 3 seasons. The 3-2 win when Harry Kane scored late on. I think it was 4-2 defeat last season. Spurs winning 2-0 at half-time. Then they just collapsed literally 5-10 minutes after the break. And this was another one. City don't like coming up against Spurs. Spurs always give them a really tough game at the Etihad. And this was injury hit Tottenham. A defensive line made up of 4 fullbacks. You're crazy. I mean, if this game was, I don't know, 2 or 3 months later down the line, I think City probably, would have run riot, because City usually come up to speed, hit the best form around, March, April time. But no, Spurs full value for a point at the Etihad. Dane Kulusevski scoring in the last minute. And good to see Giovanni Lo Celso making it 2 goals in 2 games with a good finish. So for me, I think that's game of the season. Other notable mentions: the 4-1 win over Newcastle at home. Spurs were really good that day. 4-0 at Villa. And I think as well, the 2-0 win over Man U, first home game. Because I think that's when Ange really started to get like everyone on side, everyone believing in his football philosophy, and he just, gave a hint of what's to come in the future at Spurs.
Yeah, no, they're good shouts. There are. I was trying to think if there's any kind of other little ones we missed. I mean, like I say, some of those late moments for that South Stand would have been amazing at home. Sheffield United, Liverpool as well. I know the Liverpool game itself was a little bit iffy at moments, but certainly, that's one of those moments where as a reporter, it's brilliant to report on, but I can imagine being a fan in that South Stand when that's happening in front of you must be absolutely incredible. That's what football's all about. It is about those moments, and and also, the winning with 10 men at Luton. I know it's one of those little kind of games that maybe goes under the radar, but the strength and kind of ability to show in that kind of game with 10 men was impressive as well. So, I'm just looking back over the fixtures, and that run until the Chelsea game. Some really good dugout results, aren't there? So many in there. Just tricky away from home games and beating Man U at home as well. Such a shame that Chelsea game, stupid game, just ruined it.
Right, next up, goal of the season. You can start us off, Ali.
I think the one that won the club award probably, I watched a load of them back. Porro against Burnley in the FA Cup. It's a sensational finish. It really is. And the fact that it kind of hits that postage stamp as well inside the left-hand post, it's a beautiful goal. I think it does. But there are a fair few mentions in there, I think, as well. I think Romero's early one against Burnley, that was a bit of a rocket. That's a beauty. Van de Ven against Forest, that's a lovely one as well. I was watching back some of Sonny's goals. I mean, he got a hat-trick against Burnley in that Romero game. Some of Sonny's finishes this season have been absolutely fantastic. As well, just real clinical, lovely finishes, some little curling finishes as well. Richarlison's against your lot. Actually, was it both goals? The first, there was one that was like the little stabbed kind of curling effort that's really nice when you watch it back. I'm trying to remember what his first one was. Was that the one where he took a really...
It was the volley from like 6 yards out. Destiny pulled it back to him. I've got that down. I thought that was better than his second one. I preferred that one out of the two.
Nice. There was, what was the game where he took a ball down really well into his stride?
Newcastle. I think that was the last one. Long ball over the top.
Yes.
Took it down. Did he go around the keeper or just play it past him?
I think he hit it low past him.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, that was one I saw earlier. And I was looking at a little compilation just before we came on to refresh my memory. And yeah, there's been some lovely team goals. Really nice ones where Brennan Johnson and Richarlison have linked up. There's been some lovely ones. Bentancur's at Old Trafford is a beautiful goal. Timo Werner playing it into his run, him taking a touch and scoring. Yeah, there's plenty I could pick, and there's probably some I've done an absolute disservice by not remembering. Van der Ven's actually had a couple of nice finishes, isn't he? The one at Luton was a lovely finish as well, and Maddison scored a couple of nice ones as well on the run. But yeah, I'm going to stick with the one that won the award. I think Porro FA Cup. That's. I mean, Porro himself has had a few belters, but that one for me, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's undoubtedly the best goal of the season. You know what a finish as well to lighten up such a horrific FA Cup game. That wasn't a good game at all. That
terrible,
at Spurs in January. Other ones have got Christian Romero's against Burnley. That was a really good finish. Richarlison's his first one against Everton. I thought
you really enjoy that, did you?
No, not really. But in terms of looking back at a finish, I'm pretty neutral here in terms of the job. Not talking as an Everton fan right now.
Technique.
Yeah, the technique were brilliant. And they've also got Richarlison's header against Forest. So I thought that was a really good one. As good as the header was, the cross was better from Kulusevski. So much pace on it, right into such a dangerous position in the box. And put it away really well. And then another one I've got down, Mickey van der Ven against Burnley. I thought technically that was better than the Forest one in terms of taking the ball in his stride. Dane Scarlett making a bit of room for him and then, killing it into the bottom corner. So, some good ones to choose from, but I think Porro undoubtedly is the goal of the season.
Your memory is so much better than me. And it was a game where I was away because I remember watching it on my phone. What was the one
against Wolves?
That's the one. When it went down like the touchline almost, like the goal.
That was good.
Yeah, it just popped back into my head just as we were about to wrap that up. Yeah, that was lovely. Decky, he didn't have even the goal at City kind of came off his shoulder, wasn't it? It was one of those where it's a big moment, but it probably wasn't one of his greatest goals. He didn't score as many of the beautiful goals as he has in the previous seasons, Decky, but that was a lovely little kind of bit of dancing footwork.
Yeah, definitely some important ones as well. The Sheffield United game, which we will end up mentioning soon, and the City one as well. So, before we get on to moment of the season, Ali, do you want to let everyone know about the benefits of using NordVPN? Yeah,
it's funny I should mention there watching games on my phone because that's exactly what I was doing, and it was through the help of NordVPN. You hear me talk about it every week. Those who listen to the podcast, it is something that I use constantly, NordVPN, whether it is to watch football when I can't be at a Spurs game, when I'm on my very, very rare and occasional holidays over a course of a season, and also just when I'm on holidays kind of over the summer and able to watch shows and anything I want to watch that I can't otherwise because of pesky restrictions when you cross into another country. And we get so many people that tell us as well that they've used it and it's been very, very helpful for them. By the way, I often say it is the fastest VPN in the world. No buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere on the globe without your bandwidth throttling. And not only that, but the Outlander NordVPN subscription can be cheaper for you in the long run because you can book things, let's say flights from another country. It can be cheaper to book them from your destination country rather than booking them from the UK. And NordVPN allows you to do that by switching your device to thinking it's in that country. And you can use it for various other things, security aspects. It helps lock up your phone a fair bit when you're using public Wi-Fi. There's so many other things you can use. Honestly, I'm doing it a disservice just by mentioning a few. It's really worth going and looking at their website. And because you'll be paying out for Nord, but you're actually saving money overall with the amount of things that you can use the service for. So, and also as part of the podcast, you can get a really good discount by going to nordvpn.com/gold guest. It's part of our partnership with Nord, which we've had over the season and previous seasons. It means that you guys and girls can get a great discount off of the plan yourself if you want to use it. And there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee either. And also, every time you sign up, you're helping support our podcast as well. The link, in case you missed it, is in the episode description box.
Right, next up, moment of the season. For me, Sheffield United at home. That was just incredible. A game which didn't look like it was going to go to plan for Spurs with, I think it was Gus Hamer scoring late on and then Spurs managing to dig in and somehow find a way, not only to find the equaliser through Richarlison, but to then go on and win the game 2 minutes later through Dejan Kulusevski. And such a good finish, but the move as well was so good. I think it was Doggy winning the ball, Højbjerg involved, even Perisic as well, playing such a good ball inside, I think, to Richarlison, and then Kulusevski taking a touch and shooting through the defender's legs. You can't beat a last-minute goal in football, and the scenes inside the stadium were just incredible that day. And I think what summed it up was even the players didn't know how to celebrate. They just all ran off in totally different directions to celebrate with other teammates. Incredible day. And the celebrations as well after the game were fantastic when players lined up in front of the South Stand. That was a really, really good day in Tottenham's season. I think other moments of the season, Pat Matasar's goal against Manchester United at home. He started to become a key figure in Ange's first team after, showcasing what he could do the previous campaign in the San Siro in the Champions League against AC Milan. Unfortunately, even after such a good showing, Antonio Conte didn't really use him. So for Sarr to become a key player and just deliver that big, big moment was really good. Another one they've got down, Rodrigo Bentancur's start against Aston Villa in November, because he showed in the first 30 minutes or so before he unfortunately had to go off with an injury. Just what Spurs have been missing in his absence. He looked like the Bentancur of old, the one who, was delivering week in, week out and chipping in with these important goals before he got that really cruel injury at Leicester City. And unfortunately, it's just not really worked out for him since then due to the injuries. But hopefully, the Spurs will be seeing a lot more of him from next season onwards. And another one they've got is the 1-0 win away at Luton. Just showed a different side to the game. Spurs were red hot favourites to win at Kenilworth Road, but look how Luton have performed over the course of the campaign. Arsenal won there, late on. I think it was Declan Rice who scored in stoppage time. Man U were pushed against them as well. So I think that was a really good win, and it just showed that Spurs could do it even with 10 men.
Yeah, I think for my moment of the season, I can't get away from the Chelsea game. I just can't, because on so many different levels, I think the moment there were so many emotions in that game. There was, this is ridiculous. There's, oh no, everything's gone wrong. Lost Maddison, lost Van de Ven. Romero's got sent off. The doggies got sent off. There was like so many bad things thrown at Tottenham that day. But yet, for me, it's kind of two moments, really. One was the way they set up in that second half. Just seeing the way, there was like, we were watching, and didn't they kick off after one of the Chelsea goals? I can't remember which one it was. And like, most of the Spurs players were on the halfway line for the kickoff. And you're like, what are you, like, what? It's like instantly playing to try and trap them offside. And it was incredible. So that, for me, was a moment in itself because, and I think Postecoglou's kind of alluded to this since, the players had bought in. The players had bought into what he wanted. Yeah, it was, even he's admitted, like, yeah, okay, maybe it was a bit extreme for a game like that when you've got 9 players. However, it showed him that, okay, they get it. That they're believing what we want to do. And that's them kind of wanting to play that way as well. And I think secondly was, I can't remember if it was the third or the fourth goal, when Chelsea scored and the crowd started rising to applaud their own players and cheering them and chanting for them. And for me, again, look, you could quite easily put a downer on that and say, oh, you know, it's a loser mentality, the thing that kind of, you get this toxic kind of stuff on social media nowadays. But for me, that showed a moment that actually was the opposite of that. There's been so much toxicity, is that a word, around the club in the previous season, that actually to have this moment where your team is down in a London derby, but actually they really respected the fans in that stadium, what their players had done that night and what they tried to do, and how, it was just like daft late goals. And you said like the dire moment when it could have been 2-2. You had Sonny had an effort earlier on ruled out by VAR as well.
Did Bentancur nearly score in that game?
Yeah,
was he like a whisker away or something?
Yeah, I think Bentancur and Son had really big late chances. So they could have done it. I mean, had they got a point even with 9 men, it would have been one of the results of the season. It would have been remarkable. And I just feel like, for better or worse, those moments within that game affected Spurs for the rest of the season, whether it be the bad things that meant that they had to do without certain players for so long. I mean, 2.5 months of Van de Ven and Maddison. That's really, and also the after effects, certainly for Maddison after that as well. But also the good things. And I think a lot of the Spurs players believed in that style of play. And despite that next period being very tricky with the players missing, a lot of those games, like I say about the Villa game, with a depleted squad and knackered players, they actually played a lot of the Postecoglou football, probably in a purer form that they actually ended up the season doing, which is, that's something that Postecoglou has to address. But yeah, for me, I'm sticking my kind of moments within that one game. Can I throw an unscripted category at you, which we hadn't even discussed? It's just jumped into my mind. Unsung hero of the season. Which players would you pick that have maybe not been massively heralded, but actually did quite an impressive job for the team?
I reckon you'll go for the same player, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg.
That's one of my choices. I've got two, but that's one.
Yeah, I thought he was really good, having pretty much been a regular in the Tottenham team ever since his move to the club from Southampton, to then having to make do with literally like minutes off the bench in games, but some of them really important introductions. I think the Liverpool one we've mentioned previously, he might come on for literally a couple of minutes, but it helps, speeding up. Tottenham's passing, Manchester United and Bournemouth, he came on, and helped out, and most notably the Luton one, I think, away from home after Bissouma's red card. So I'd probably go for Højbjerg.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. He was definitely one of mine. And look, he's not always going to be a fan's favourite. And does he fit the Postecoglou system? Not really. It's, we saw it did expose some of his weaknesses.
Emerson.
But I think... Well, no, I was talking about Højbjerg.
All right. I thought you were saying you run.
No. I'm backing up what you're saying. I did think that Højbjerg was so professional this season. We've seen so many players, and at Spurs as well, kick up a fuss, have a strop, not give their all because they're not playing. And like you say, Hobby has gone from starting pretty much every single game since he arrived from Southampton to a season where I think, what did he start? Was it 6 games, something like that in the Premier League? It was just barely anything. Yet every time he's come on, he has tried to give 100%, and a lot of the times really helped Spurs. So yeah, I think as an unsung hero, he's definitely one. And the other, I'm going to go for Ben Davies. I know it was only for a period of the season, but for those 10 games, it crossed my mind when we were talking about those injury hit games. For those 10 matches, he was brilliant when he stepped into centre back. I think I remember our podcast where we were just raving about him every week. And I think it probably kind of got lost in the rest of the season. Just what a brilliant job he did for the team in those moments into a position which, yeah, he's played as a centre-back in a 3 before, and he does that for Wales, but to actually play within a kind of a 2, and often with someone that was less experienced in that position, like Emerson Royale, I just thought he did such a great job. And with both players, we don't know. Maybe both players could end up moving on this summer. Højbjerg would seem very likely to, but you never know with Ben Davies. He's got a year left. We don't know what his future holds, how much football he wants to play next season, whether Ange sees him as... I would imagine you would want Ben Davies as part of your squad because of his versatility, but if the player wants to go out and play week in, week out, you would never begrudge someone like Ben Davies. So yeah, I think for 2 players that have been there for the club, who aren't the favourites among the fans, who aren't, sexy footballers. You're not going to see them as the ones that the kids get in FIFA and Football Manager and all that. It's not FIFA anymore, is it? EAFC. Yeah, I think in terms of really helping out the squad at key moments this season, I think they were both there for the team.
Yeah, 2 good shouts. We'll go to player of the season now then. You can go first.
I would... There's a few in this. I think I would go for... I'll give you my choices. So you've got, for me, Vicario, Romero, Van de Ven, and I think Sonny has to come into the question. I know he hasn't been consistently amazing in his performances, but I mean his amount of goal contributions are just ridiculous. The numbers have actually escaped me. I know it was 17 goals. I think was it 9 assists? I think it was something like 26 goal involvements in all, which is just obscene. I think I put together his club and country ones when I did my player ratings, and it is something obscene, like 34, 36 goal involvements in 39 games. It's just ridiculous. So he has to be in contention. It's a tough one. But to choose between them, I would say for the impact made, even though he missed 2.5 months, I would probably go for Van de Ven. What a spectacular kind of signing he's been. And again, we've said this before, the one that was considered the cheap option against Tapsoba. He has been, for me, one of the best defenders in the Premier League. And had he been available for those 2.5 months, would have, for me, been in the Premier League team of the season. I think he's been that good. I think Vicario runs him close. And Romero has a great shout as well to be in there. But I just feel like Van de Ven, in terms of your calling card and pretty much saying, I'm a Premier League star, I just think he's been magnificent. And the whole Postecoglou system, when it's worked, has worked with him in that back line, mopping up so much behind. And it's just really exciting that he can only get better as well as a defender. As Postecoglou keeps telling us, his ceiling is so ridiculously high. Oh, sorry, as Postecoglou says, he has no ceiling. He doesn't like to even put a ceiling on these things. I think he could be remarkable. I hope he has a great Euros as well, continues to build his confidence. For me, yeah, I think even with the months out, it's very close with Vicario, but I think he just pips him.
Yeah, same for me. Mickey Van de Ven, incredible debut season at the club, because you just never know how these new signings are going to adapt to the club. But yeah, literally right from the start on it as well, and thrown in for his Premier League debut at Brentford with a couple of days training to his name under Postecoglou, and he's just kicks on from there. I know I mentioned it about Romero on the pod the other day, saying I don't think there's many better Premier League defenders than him. I think the same goes for Van de Ven as well. I think he's probably already in the top 5 or 6 centre-backs in the Premier League, and the best thing is he's just going to become even better, and he's done well when he's had to play at left back in the final few games of the season. chipped in with some really important goals at times as well. And it's just another what if he didn't get injured? Where would Spurs be in the Premier League table? Yeah, I think he's just been a fantastic acquisition. And I echo your sentiments in terms of hopefully has a really strong Euros with Holland. I don't know whether or not he'll be in the starting 11, but fingers crossed he'll get some minutes in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know we have to point out the irony that we've picked 2 centre-backs and a goalkeeper there in our potential kind of player of the season options, despite the fact that Spurs did concede a lot of goals. Not as many as last season, but they did. But I do think there was a lot of that is them working out the system, the injuries, the amount of goals they conceded during that period as well. And also the midfield. The midfield going through so many changes and struggles in form in not being able to protect that back line as well played its part. So, yeah, I don't think it's unfair that the centre-backs are up there in the discussion for player of the season and the goalkeeper, because I don't always feel it was down to them that a lot of those goals were conceded. I think next season, purely because of how good I feel like Spurs are going to be going forward and the ball is going to be up the other end of the pitch so much, I think there's going to be a lot less work for the defence to do. So I would imagine just naturally we'll see a lot more clean sheets and fewer goals conceded. I really hope I'm not replaying this in a year's time going, whoop, he was wrong there. But yeah, I think Van de Ven for me.
Yeah, I had Romero and Vicario in the top 3 as well, pretty much neck and neck. I can't decide out of the 2 of them who would come second and who were third. So I thought both were fantastic. But no, I think in terms of the top 3, I don't think you can really argue with that. I think Son's, probably there or thereabouts, but not in the top 3 for me. Young player of the season, then we're doing 2 different awards for this one. One is for clubs under 21s, and the other one is for the player under the age of 21 in the first team. So, do you want to start us off, Ali?
I just love the fact that we're calling them awards, as if we're going to rock up at the training ground. Here you go. Here's a little statue we made ourselves out of Play-Doh or something. Yeah, I think for the first team, I would go for Destiny. I think it has to be. We talk about kind of impacts in your first season. His has been ridiculous. I know there's been some learning moments along the way. Obviously the red card against Chelsea and got a suspension as well for yellow cards, didn't he? And obviously he's been unfortunate with a couple of injuries throughout the campaign and the one that ended his season. But I just think he took on the whole to not only a new league, a new culture, a new style of football, but just everything to do with the game, a new system, a new inverted kind of fullback role that he'd never played in his life. I mean, he was mainly a wing back, wasn't he, at Udinese? To have to come inside and play as a midfielder at times has been such a huge season for him, and he's just taken it all in his stride. I think Pat Matasar would have been another strong contender for this, because I think he's had a real kind of improved season. But I think in terms of consistency, I think Destiny was terrific. And also, like I said about Van de Ven, there's so much more to come. There's so much more where there's moments of decision making, whereas a young player, you can see he's picked the wrong option, whereas he will stop and learn to do different kind of decisions in those moments next season onwards as well. I just think he's been an absolutely fantastic acquisition for Spurs. And again, I don't want to harp on about the fact that these players aren't costing them so much money, because yes, I'm like everyone. I want a big money signing, a big statement signing, of course, but it does show that if the money becomes a little bit kind of, it's not as important if you get the scouting and the selection of the player right. And the irony actually is with Udogie is he was a player signed for a completely different manager. I've said this before. He would have rocked up expecting all these fellow Italians at the club, and there's this kind of big gruff Australian waiting for him, and it would have been completely different to what he was anticipating coming into. And it's testament to his character that he's come in and done so well. So yeah, I'll go with that. I'll tell you what, we'll do your first team one as well before we go into the under-21s. Who's yours?
Destiny as well. I think it's out of Destiny and Pap. But over the course of the season, I think Destiny has been more consistent. And for him as well to come to the Premier League, no experience of playing in England, and just, excelling right from the word go. He just looks made for Ange Postecoglou's system. Chipped in with some important contributions in the final third. So yeah, I think for me that's an easy choice. Pat Matasar, I think brilliant for Spurs this season, but I think his form has probably dipped since the AFCON in terms of consistency. And I don't think what's probably helped his cause is that there's been a lot of maybe chopping and changing in midfield at times to try and find this perfect midfield combination. And likes of James Maddison, Yves Bissouma, Rodrigo Benzinger haven't been at the best as well. But I think it has been Tottenham's best midfielder this season. Scored some important goals as well for the team. I think Manchester United at home, Brighton as well, which helped them go on and win when Brennan Johnson scored in the last minute. So yeah, I think those are the top two with Destiny coming out on top.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there in terms of a young player needs an experienced head guiding them as well in games. And you're spot on, I think, with Basuma and Maddison both fluctuating in terms of form and also availability. I do feel like that had a bit of a knock-on effect on Sarr, and he didn't quite have such a clear role as he did maybe in those early kind of 10 games or so. But in terms of the under-21s, there's quite a few candidates I think you could put up for this. You could say Will Lankshire's had an incredible season in front of goal. Iago Santiago has been brilliant down the wing as well. Judson Bell on the other flank has been fantastic. Tyrese Hall in the second half of the season has been terrific. George Abbott's had a brilliant season for them. Two goalkeepers have done well as well. Josh Keeley in the first half of the season, then going off the second half to Barnett and doing very well. Luca Gunter's done very well as well. There are a load of ones, but for me, I just can't look past Jamie Donnelly. I think Jamie Donnelly has had a remarkable season. He's when you get to this phase when you can see a player playing for the under-21s and it's become too easy. That for me has been Jamie Donnelly, where now he is ripe and ready for first team football. He's just setting up goals at will, scoring goals from like near the halfway line at times and things like that because he just knows he can. And Will Lankshire, I spoke to him, was it a week or two back, and he admitted that essentially he's been Premier League 2 player of the season pretty much because of what Jamie Donnelly's done for him and set him up for so many goals. And obviously he's got his reward, Jamie, with his 3 Premier League appearances and the FA Cup appearance as well. And actually, when he's come on in all of those games, he hasn't looked out of place. He's looked very intelligent in what he did. There was a tactical foul against, was it Brentford? I think it was. Yeah. Was it Morpay? I think he brought down and just used the ball really well. And I feel like they've got a decision to make. It's whether they keep him around for first team involvement, potentially for Europa League mainly and things like that, or whether they let him out on loan next season. But I think he's just had a phenomenal season. I really feel like the sky's the limit for him now because he's a hard worker as well. I know he's had a little knee problems towards the end of the season, which hopefully this summer will just iron out for him and he can rest it up. But he's going to be a terrific player. And he's Spurs through and through. He is a Spurs fan, so he's kind of living the dream, which is always fantastic to see. And look, there's other young players. Mikey Moore, of course. We're not ignoring Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore, though, hasn't even played for the under-21s this season. He's had a bit of a disrupted season with injury, but obviously it's ended in this really spectacular fashion with a couple of first-team appearances and going to the European Championships for under-17s and starring for England with, 4 goals and an assist. So he's had a brilliant season, but I think in terms of a consistent, terrific season, Jamie Donnelly has just been incredible.
Yeah, I've got 3 names down. Jamie Donnelly, Will Lankshire and Tyrese Hall. You could make a case for all of them, really. They've all had terrific, seasons, but I've gone for Will Lankshire. Just to, contribute with 32 goals. I think, was it Premier League 2 Player of the Year? He's won important goals as well with Spurs, winning trophies. I think he's been fantastic. And, it's another one for Ange Postecoglou, certainly to keep an eye on in terms of the players from the under-21s progressing to the first team. Real shame that he won on the trip to Australia for the postseason friendly against Newcastle, but I think he should be in contention for the friendlies this summer, certainly. I think Ange will definitely want to be taking a look at him at some point, and, you know, if you're scoring that amount of goals for the under-21s, hopefully it bodes well for the future for him. I think he's had a really, really good year, and, you know, fingers crossed next year's even better for him.
Yeah, that preseason is going to be such a kind of a proving ground. It's almost like just a masses of trials for so many of those young players. It's like they're not quite last chance, but it's a huge opportunity with the players away after the Copa America and Euros for so many of them to lay down their marker. And you've got Lucas Bergvall coming into the team as well, and into the squad, and how he'll do. And, you know, players like Troy Parrott coming back. You know, we talk about young players. We haven't even mentioned Troy, who's had this incredible season in the Eredivisie, really. 17 goals and 5 assists for a team that finished 16th in the Eredivisie. Is his future going to be at Tottenham? I don't know. I don't know whether... I'd love it for Ange to have a good look at him again in pre-season, because I don't think the Troy Parrott of last summer is the same Troy Parrott as this summer. I think he's developed just exponentially. It's just huge what he's done. There are clubs interested in him. You know, I understand that AZ Alkmaar are really, really interested in signing him. And if I was one of those top teams in the Eredivisie, I would absolutely be saying, well, if he scored that many for the 16th place team, just think how many he could score for us. You know, he could get into the high 20s, 30s even, because his technique is remarkable. But yeah, I'd love to see players like that just get a little look in. And, you know, we're not even mentioning like Matty Craig. Matty Craig went to Doncaster Rovers and had a brilliant time there. He's been so good, and he'll come back a completely kind of different player. And we've got Alejo Velez has got to come back. We've got to see what happens with him. But yeah, there's so many exciting young players right now within the squad. And yeah, it's how we all want big transfers this summer, but we've also got to be a bit wary of blocking some of these potential talents that are coming into the team as well. And I'm sure Postecoglou he'll juggle it all, and hopefully we'll find a way through.
Right, I think that's it for today's awards ceremony, unless you've got any more, you know, awards to spring up on us.
Surprise categories.
Yeah.
No, none that I can think of. But we're going to be back, aren't we, later in the week? So we'll have more to talk about this week.
We will do. Yeah, I'm not sure what day it'll be, but we'll be back at some point later this week. In the meantime, you know, just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/gold guest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support our podcast. The link is in the episode description box.